We laugh. We cry. We learn. But really, what doesn't kill you makes you better at managing clients and everyone. I'm Morgan Friedman, and this is Client Horror Stories. Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Client Horror Stories. I'm honored to have tonight with the one and only Robert Persichitte. I hope I pronounced that last name correctly.
You got it.
And I'm already excited for this episode because I always invite all my guests to have a beer because it makes the best episode. But Robert actually has a beer. So this is fantastic.
That's the Denver lifestyle.
I'm jealous already. So let's jump right into your story. I'm excited to hear all about today's client horror story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, I apologize for being an accountant because usually there's no exciting accounting stories. This is an exception, I assure you. I'm an accountant. I help people basically understand what their financial future is going to look like and make plans around that financial future. And one of the horror stories that I went through is with this attorney who was pretty high level, pretty high earner, very high stress job. And he really, really wanted to retire. He wanted to retire as soon as possible. He absolutely hated his job and wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Now, when you're going through this process, you have to talk to the clients and take input from the clients about what their life is like, what their goals are, what they kind of expect things to look like. Because really, money is useless without context, right? If you're earning a bunch of money, but you're not spending it, does it really matter? So we try to contextualize that. We try to put everything in the context of goals. But this is where the problem came in with this client. He gave us an estimate, and he gave us an estimate of about $6,000 a month in lifestyle expenses. And what that entails is really everything other than your debt payments, your house payments, and your car payments. This is just your having fun money. It's paying for things like groceries, going out. If you're like buying a new TV or something fun, that goes into this budget. And $6,000 a month, that's pretty high in my opinion. But we go with what we hear. Once he's been a client for a while, though.
So just to be clear, the to set up for the excitement that's surely going to happen, the $6,000 a month, was that his goal of what he wanted to have, or the $6,000 in expenses was his current budget?
That was his estimate of his budget. That's what he says. I think I'm spending $6,000.
Current spending. Got it.
Yep, exactly. So when we asked him, how much do you spend a month? How much do you need for this stuff? He says, I really don't know. I think it's $6,000 a month. Now, it's very common for clients to not know if they're a high earner. So if somebody's making hundreds of thousands of dollars, they probably can't nail that number down because they never really had to. There was never pressure on them in the past. So we're kind of used to clients lying a little bit. Once they're a client for a while, you get to see what's going on. And you're setting goals for them and saying, hey, put this much aside from your account. I expect, based on what you're told, the things that you're telling me, based on what you're telling me, we're going to have a certain balance in the savings accounts by the end of the year. Now, usually what happens with a new client, you go look at that and you say, okay, well, we're way off. Almost nobody guesses it right. And you give them a call and say, all right, let's kind of get this in line with what we expect it to be. Now, this guy was way off. And what he was actually spending, or his household was actually spending, was about $10,000 a month. Now, what makes it even one step harder, this guy was at work all the time. he was not the person spending it. He was not the one in the household spending that money. He only spent about $2,000 a month. And the other $8,000 a month came from his wife, who was the spender. So then we have a really big difference.
We're definitely not going to mention any stereotypes here, because any relation that have to stereotypes of men and women in marriage is purely coincidental, because stereotypes are bad.
I agree. This is a specific thing that actually happened to me. So,
exactly.
It could be flipped. I've seen it flipped. It's possible that it's flipped. In this scenario, he was not spending as much as his wife. So she spent about $8,000 a month. And our job is to call them and say, hey, your financial plan, that plan we put together, 6-8 months ago, it's not going to work. It's not going to work because your reality that you're communicating with us doesn't match the actual reality of the situation. It's kind of a complete fiction there because it's way off. You're way off. Now, this is where it gets really tricky and awkward for us.
Before we go to where it gets tricky and awkward, I just want to make a client commentary on that, which is, it's based on just what you said so far. It seems like the challenge is he kind of lived in his own world. He didn't have a sense of reality. So it sounds like he wasn't purposely lying to you, but he didn't know his wife was spending this. And this is an interesting pattern in client relationships, because what happens all the time is clients lie, but it's not because they're like malicious or trying to lie to you. Is they're just so disconnected from reality. They're not seeing what's in front of their noses.
Oh, Morgan, you hit the nail on the head. And realistically, this guy had no idea. He had no clue. Something's not a problem. Somebody's taking care of something in the background. Who cares? I don't have to think about this. It's not showing up on my desk. I got a million things to think about, especially this client in particular. The guy was a workaholic. I mean, the guy was working between 60 and 80 hours a week. He was working all the time. He didn't have time to sit down and go through his budget, which is why he had a lot of money to begin with. But it's also why he didn't know. He just didn't know. I agree with you completely that it wasn't malicious. It was ignorance, which is maybe part of the reason why he hired somebody like my firm. So in solving that, we have to solve it because, again, he's paying us. I want to retire as early as possible. And, we told him 58, 59, you can retire early. But we were expecting $6,000 a month. At $10,000 a month, no, you can't retire early. You're going to have to work into your mid to late 60s here. So we have to have a call, and we really need to get everybody in the household, the spender, the wife, the spender, the husband, the earner, and us. We all need to get on the same page about what's important, what are the goals, what's actually going to happen. Are you going to be able to follow this plan? Once we give it to you, are you going to be able to listen to us? And there's a joke in the industry that a good financial planner is part accountant, part marriage counselor, because a lot of times they might not have the best communication as your clients, and you kind of have to be the go-between to make that work.
But by the way, it's a great saying. I'd never heard it before, but you're the only financial planner I know, actually. So it makes sense I haven't heard it before. But what's interesting is this, I think, that saying, I think, could apply to almost any professional relationship. Like half of a lawyer's job is just getting clients, well, what do you really want to do? Do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And a lot of marketing, like my profession, is also very similar. Well, what kind of business do you want to build, and what are the consequences of those of those decisions? Just helping people think through these big life questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this is my commentary as a married person, not as a financial planner, but in that relationship, sometimes you have different views on the world and different views on what you envision your life to be like in the future. It's not just true in marriage, it's true in business, it's true in anything where we internalize these assumptions and we internalize what our vision for the future is. When you're talking with a professional, any type of professional, but in my case, a financial professional especially, my job is to quantify these views. And I have to put your vision for the future down into a math problem. And I have to get one specific vision for the future. I can't just average out what each of you wants your retirement to look like. It needs to be one vision for the future with one outcome.
I love that phrase. I think I'm going to start using it because it's actually very much the same in marketing. Like in marketing, we need to figure out how to get people buying our product, and you just need a formula. Okay, we get this percentage of sales from this funnel. That'll have these numbers associated with it. This cost per client leads to this. This percentage buying leads to this recurring income. It's just taking their vision for the kind of growth that they want and mapping it to formulas, and then making it really happen. So I like your way of putting it. This is very generalizable.
You leave it to an accountant to take a problem and turn it into a math problem. That's how we see the whole world.
But by the way, my father is an accountant, so I
noble profession. A lot of times when I'm introducing myself to students or to new people, I like to tell them that I'm an accountant in my soul. And it's very interesting, the different reactions that I get of sometimes it's, oh, how sad. That's kind of my favorite reaction. But I think, all I'm doing is quantifying whatever. If I'm quantifying your desire to retire, or I'm quantifying your, wanting to get out of your terrible job. I'm quantifying those things. How much do you want to get out of there? What number do you want to get out of there? And making it fit with the rest of the accounting equation or the, financial, whatever, right. Whatever problem you're facing.
Exactly.
So anyway, we're at this head with, it's me, it's another planner, and it is the husband and wife. And we call them up on the phone and say, hey, try to phrase it as positively as possible, because we don't want to lose him into the client. We don't want him to be shocked or upset here. So we say, all right, we have good news for you. Our good news is you can still achieve your goal as long as you can get your lifestyle expenses down to $8,000 a month. And of course, the husband says, well, sure, that seems completely reasonable. I thought we were only spending $6,000 a month. And the wife is extremely quiet. We couldn't get him in a room together. He had a very busy schedule. So we couldn't get everybody in the room together. It was over the phone. It was over actually a conference call. They weren't even in the room together.
In the pre-Zoom era, so you couldn't see her face.
Yes, pre-Zoom, we couldn't see anybody. So all we had was an awkward silence to go off of. And, he's just like, yep, I think that's reasonable. And we're just kind of hoping like, hey, wife, can you please tell him? Surely you know that you're spending way more than you originally estimated. And eventually he broke the silence and said, that's got me curious. How much are we spending a month? And that's when we came in and said, well, you're spending about $10,000 a month. And his response, he kind of intuitively knew, I'm not spending that much per month. And so I think the guy got it right away of where's the rest of this coming from? And kind of went to his wife and said, hey, do you think that goal is reasonable? And her response is, yes, it's reasonable. And again, remember, this is discretionary spending here. This is not your house, everything else. And so at that point, we kind of got to, for lack of a better term, pass the buck and just say, hey, you're on your own now. Thank you. I'm glad we brought this to your attention. Goodbye. And check back in regularly to see, okay, did this actually fix the problem? Did she rein that spending in, or did they, I guess he could just stop spending money is another solution. But did they rein that spending in to make their goals achievable?
Okay, so let's pause here. One question is I liked your voice of the wife saying, yeah, I think that's achievable. When people talk to me like that, I think it feels like a euphemism and they don't actually want to do it. So so it's interesting. You're just like, okay, my response is, you said, oh, you're on your own. We'll check back in. But my response would have been to be like super clear and strong, dude, to achieve the goal, this needs to happen. There's a huge issue. Go figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Here's where I kind of have the philosophical difference. And this is partially where we are in terms of just financial planning. Of we have two competing goals. And one of the goals is I don't like my high stress job and I want to retire as soon as possible. And the other goal is I want to spend lots of money every month. And either one of those goals is achievable. Both of them are not. Both of them are not. One or the other is.
Right.
And so for me, again, this is where it became so difficult from a professional standpoint of, hey, whatever you choose, whatever one of those goals is actually important to you, we can do it. We can get there. It's just, it's going to take us longer to get there one way. And different professionals in the industry have different views on this of, are you more of a coach where you're trying to steer them in the right direction? Or are you more of the enforcer saying, getting on that phone saying, hey, put down the credit card, you got to stop spending, you hit your limit for the month. And it's a fine line to walk, because if you're the enforcer, if you're laying down the law, you're going to have an adversarial relationship with your client. They're going to see your name on the caller ID, say, oh my gosh, this guy is going to yell at me. He's just going to tell me what to do. And I don't want to do it because I want to spend this money. And realistically, what it comes down to is, your words are stating one goal and your actions are doing something completely different. And my suspicion is that she knew how much she was spending from the get-go, just because of her response to the call, her response to why we were there. I feel like she kind of knew the jig is up.
So we'll get back to her in a minute, but I feel like your comment on being the coach versus the enforcer, I think we're hitting on a super important point that's at the heart of being a professional, which is the more boring framing of this whole podcast. Client horror story sounds exciting, but I want to hear a horror story. But it's really about how to act like a professional. And I actually think you're hitting on a really important point. And in every episode, I try to get at least one new point that no one has ever said before in the whole history of the podcast. And I think this might be the point in the episode, that as a professional, you have to walk this line between being the enforcer so the message is clear, they do what's needed, but your point is great. You don't want to be the asshole. Then they won't want to work with you. And like who wants to work with an asshole? I don't, but you need to be strong. And then versus the other extreme of just like being the coach being supportive and do this and do this and do this. But if you're like too nice and euphemistic, then there's too much high of a risk that they don't get the message, and they don't actually they don't actually do the right thing.
Oh, totally. And I think that's actually one of the reasons that so many people are drawn to, really, they call themselves financial professionals, but they're people that have no business in the industry. It's a lot of scams out there where you go to somebody, and I think we all kind of hear it with a lot of the multi-level marketing spiel of give me $10,000 and then you can quit your job forever. And I think we all kind of know intuitively, like, that's too good to be true. I don't think that if I just give a little bit of money, I can retire and never work again, right? I think we intuitively know, yeah, retirement's kind of hard and it's a slow road. But when you have me, the accountant, saying, yeah, slow road, eat your vegetables, we'll get there eventually, versus somebody off the street saying, party time, do whatever you want, and we're going to get there and it's going to be super easy. The client is ultimately making that choice. And so sometimes we do sugarcoat things of saying, spend what you want, and that's always what I come back to. Spend what you want, do whatever you want. There's going to be consequences down the road. And me, very math-oriented person, do it. Spend $10,000 a month. I don't care. You're going to just retire 6 years later. And whatever you want, man, it's your life. And I don't think that's what you really want. And really, to your point, you got to give that client enough of a push that they're going to do the right thing. And
that makes sense. I want to make another observation, just riffing on what you're saying.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, earlier today, nothing to do with this, I happened to tweet an observation. I thought of that that values are the values are meaningless unless you make explicit a trade-off against another value. And what I realized listening to you right now is this is kind of the definition of a professional. Like the non-professional, oh yeah, let's fix this, let's build this, let's do this, let's make this happen. But the core in any profession, financial professional, lawyer, marketer, doctor, the core of the professional worldview is basically saying, hey, you need to understand their trade-offs of what you're doing. In fact, the better the professional, the better and more sophisticated and subtle understanding they have of the trade-offs. Because sometimes the trade-offs are easy numbers. Oh, this number goes up, that number goes down. But sometimes the trade-offs are emotional. Hey, you can work really, really hard, but you might burn yourself out. And so I also really like this definition and framing of the professional is the person that lets the client take charge of their own life. The professional is just the advisor, but really helping them make clear and understand the different trade-offs that will come as a result of the different options in front of them.
Absolutely. And the way that I phrase that, I couldn't agree more. I phrase it as there's a difference between a goal and a wish. I wish I looked like Terry Crews, right? I wish I woke up tomorrow, I had great big muscles and, I could just walk down the street like that. That's not a goal because I'm not spending 10 hours a day in the gym. If it was a goal, I would take steps towards that goal and steps to do that. And in fact, I kind of intuitively know what does it take to look like Terry Crews? A lot. It takes a lot to look like that. You're going to be in the gym all the time. And it's the same with retirement and financial planning of, I have a wish to retire. I'm not saving anything. I have a wish to have this outcome, but I'm still going to spend just like I did before. I'm not going to take any steps to actually get there. And just like you said, just like you said, Morgan, the professionals have to really guide people into making something achievable. And having a path to get there, and maybe sometimes having hard conversations of saying, yeah, you have to give up. You can't do everything that you want to do to get to this goal. Getting to this goal is going to require these different sacrifices to get there.
Yeah, and definitely, I think this is an interesting point. And then I would take it a step further, where these are even, let's say, more obvious trade-offs. But then, as you get more and more high level, you get the trade-offs become more subtle and more complex. Okay, I'm putting away $6,000 a month in savings so I can reach my goal, but I can put them in stocks which are higher risk or bonds that are lower risk. So let's talk about like the trade-offs of where to put the money. So it's this similar. So even breaking free of the having hard conversations dynamic, this is, I think, a broader, more applicable point to say that at every level of making a decision, let's really think through the trade-offs and consequences.
Yeah. Well, and once you have the commitment, you can get more in the weeds, you can get more in depth. But I can have a perfect financial plan and, perfect investments. And then if you spend all the money, it doesn't matter. It's all completely irrelevant. I didn't have to do all that work. I could have gone home early. It doesn't matter unless you're actually following through with it.
Agreed. So speaking of follow through, I'm happy you're chugging the beer. So you had the hard conversation, and then how did it turn out, and what happened?
So the immediate consequence, like I said, is thank God that's over. And I hung up the phone and I put the notes into my system and said, "Oh, I'm not going to think about this anymore today." Obviously, I couldn't do that because he was still my client.
Right.
I had to see how that plan was going. Eventually, the spending, I shouldn't even say eventually, it was really in the course of like 2 or 3 months, the spending got under control. And we got to see those firm commitments into those savings goals. And he was on track to meet his goal. Just kind of moving through, he was able to, and I always kind of refer back to the lawyer. The lawyer was my client. And so I certainly care about the wife's well-being, his spouse's well-being. She wasn't my client. So got it under control, was able to get to that goal, and is on track for that early retirement, which is
so
what he wanted.
So crisis averted and happy ending. So they're
still married, so that worked.
You did not cause a divorce.
I did not cause a divorce. I did not lose a client.
I'm happy about both of those. So from the eyes as a professional, the horror of that story is that moment when you're forced to interject yourself into their relationship to basically expose this secret bad behavior of the wife to the husband. And that is like a terrorful, if that's a word, terrorful, full of terror. I think it's a horrible, full of horror. It's a horrorful moment to be in there, because who wants to become as a human who wants to go between a husband and wife, but as a professional, you go between a husband and wife, the husband's going to choose the wife over you.
Oh, totally. And on top of that, I myself am a very analytical numbers person. I don't want to be there. I don't want to talk about feelings. I want to talk about a math problem. I'm good at math problems. I'm not good at feelings. And that was early on in my career. I think as I progressed, I learned a lot more about, yes, it's numbers. I'm doing math. I'm doing equations and numbers here. But the reason that these people are talking to me, the whole reason that they picked up the phone is because they have a feeling about something. And that might only be kind of related to the numbers. Their feelings are what's driving their relationship to me in the first place. So I need to be receptive of that and deal with it. Now, I still would say I do not like being in between a husband and wife, especially when they can't agree on something, because, if they can't agree in my office, they probably can't agree in other places either. And I can't just magically fix that. But you have to be able to smooth it over enough to get down to your answer, what you need for your job. And for me, that's what's important. What is the number one priority here?
What's also interesting to me is I'm trying to abstract out this lesson into a broader lesson is how frequently people's personal lives become a core part of their work, and thus as a professional advisor, that the marriage counselor joke ends up being like maybe professionals should be required to get therapist degrees as well.
Yeah, I think there's like this mistake, this false thing that gets perpetuated, and maybe it's kind of the same thing. Talking about kids, you have this view that grown-ups have their stuff together, and that when you stop being a kid and you start being a grown-up, then you're able to make analytical decisions and make good decisions, and everything's easy to do. And I think we extend that one step further in saying, I think these CEOs and CFOs must clearly have all their lives together to get there, because that's if they don't have it together, who has it together? And I think that it couldn't be further from the truth. The reality of it is we're all people, and we're all subject to dealing with fear and dealing with desires and even things that might not be surface visible of what do I care about and what's important to me. And we have to have conversations in order to really draw that up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when you're growing up, I think the model of that a lot of people have of the world is that by and large people 15 years older than them know how things go. So like when I was in high school, I was like, wow, college students are so smart and philosophical. And you get to college and you're like, no, they're just drunken idiots. But wow, everyone in the real world has a job and responsibility. You know what they're doing? Then you go into the real world and get a job. You're like, no one knows what they're doing.
And then you're like, they're drunken idiots too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you just get in, but you're like, oh no, but my boss. Oh no, but my parents. And then one day you're a parent, you're a boss, and you still think, oh no. But but those uber successful 60-year-old gazillionaires, they're the ones that know what they're doing. And then you read about the uber successful gazillionaire, you're like, after his 8th divorce, and you're like, no, he's just as much of a disaster as everyone else. And I think part of being, if this isn't just a professional, I'll broaden out of being an adult, I think, is this realization that kind of everyone is a mess. And as a result, your responsibility as an adult, and what separates the adults from the children is, or let's say the adult mindset from the children's mindset, is to say, everyone's a mess, and it's my responsibility and only my responsibility to turn my life from not being a mess into some semblance of of order.
Oh, totally. And I think eventually in life, you figure out there's no epiphany moment. There's no magical moment where you can completely divorce your emotions from your professional life. And I talk to a lot of engineers, and especially engineers seem to have this view that there's a right answer. There's a perfect answer that goes along with everything. And there's a field that's emerging of, it's called behavioral finance, of there is, in accounting, there is a right answer. There is one optimal answer, but we almost never should recommend it because people don't follow that. So we should do this maybe pretty good answer that they're actually going to do and follow and use. And we should not treat our clients like robots who are going to perfectly execute everything. We should treat them instead of flawed humans who we want to make kind of a tilt in the right direction, a push in the right direction, rather than instantaneously changing their life trajectory.
By the way, I love that point. It's exactly my approach as a professional in marketing as well. But the way I usually make that same point to people is by quoting a classic observation. It comes in my mind. It's fairly obscure, though, but I love it. But it's not original. I didn't invent it. I heard it one song ago that the best diet is the one that you stick to. And because everyone always argues, what's the healthiest diet? Oh, should I be paleo or vegan or vegetarian? But the reality is 90% of the time, you're that way for 3 months. And then there's some crisis in life and you start eating candy and you're eating unhealthy again. But whichever of the theoretically ideal diets is a lot less important than just having some process, some system that's just healthy enough, like vegan, vegetarian, paleo, whatever, any of those is better than just eating Three Musketeers and Twizzlers and candy all day long. So it's just having one that you stick to, and that's my way of making that point. But it's just like your point about behavioral finance that I had never wired it into accounting before, but it makes perfect sense that rather than saying, oh yeah, do this thing that you're unlikely to actually do that will save you the most money, as opposed to this balance, you'll be able to do it easily and it'll save you just enough. Go.
Exactly. Yeah. What you said reminded me, my wife and I were talking recently. I bought the vitamins for our kids, and she comes to me and she says, hey, don't buy these vitamins for our kids because I see this study that says it's better for them to get it from fresh fruits and vegetables. And I said, they're eating macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets. What fresh fruit and vegetables are part of this diet here? Let's do this. We don't want to make perfect the enemy of good. Yeah,
that's Voltaire's line. That's the final line of one of his poems. Is a great way of stating a point, and we can never be reminded of too often. In fact, it's one of my personal struggles as a recovering perfectionist. Maybe I should start a blog for myself, recoveringperfectionist.com. That it's taken a lot of discipline on myself in order to realize, it's the perfect enemy of the good. I want things that are just good enough, and you can tweak them into perfection.
Yeah. I tend to look at things with a growth mindset, and it means that you're going to do a lot of things wrong. But the very comforting thought that always stays with me is that somewhere in the future, there is a better version of you.
Oh, I like that. That. I hadn't thought about that before.
But if you go in and you're trying to make things better, you probably won't achieve perfection, but there is better in your future. You can achieve better. That better is very easy to achieve. Better just means a slight change. And I think in terms of just the communications of making things happen that are achievable is so much more important than things that are perfect. And that philosophy's always really stayed with me of, I will be better. I will do this little thing. I'll read this book instead of going on TikTok, or I will study for an exam instead of playing video games. Whatever it is, it's not going to make me perfect. There's not going to be this actualization that I hit, but it's going to get me a little bit closer to my goal.
Yeah, I like thinking about that from the context of being an adult as well, because in the children's view is I need to study to get the A on the exam, but as an adult, there's no exam, and because there's no exam, what we can either create your own exam, i.e., like there are a lot of structures you can join. People join religions, go to universities, structure jobs in order to get structure into their life, or you can say, there's no structure, and a good alternative to structure is this sort of the perfect is enemy of the good. I'm going to compare myself to myself 30 days ago or 1 year ago, and just and constantly improve. And what I want to add to that is I think it's interesting to wrap this back to this moment of fear on the call of where you had to get in the middle of this marriage. And when you said that 20 minutes ago, I pushed back at it on you. I was like, I think I would have been stronger, because I tend to be strong and dark on these things. And now, having really analyzed this philosophically, now we're tying it back in. Now it's clear to me why you took this softer approach, because perhaps the harder line might have made the message clearer and stronger, but there's like the worst consequence of causing a problem in their marriage or causing a problem between them. So rather than going for the perfect answer, no, you need to cut this off, stop this, cancel this credit card there. You went for not the perfect, but the good. So I like how you're philosophically, your actions are consistent with your philosophy.
Being an accountant forces you to do this. And another industry joke, accounting is 2 months of planning for everything and then 2 weeks of shrugging your shoulders and saying it is what it is. When you're dealing with a tight deadline, sometimes you just have to do it. And I think it really pushed me into it's one of the many things in my life that really pushed me into let's get it good enough. Let's get it as good as it can be. And, to be fair, I didn't know it was going to work out. I really didn't. Benefit of hindsight, I can say, yeah, the soft touch worked. The guy got, everybody got what he wanted. The guy got to retire. Spending was a little bit higher than they originally anticipated, but, not a big enough issue that I ever heard about it. And I didn't know that at the time. Another outcome that could have happened was, yeah, she's still spending.
Right.
I'm just going to have to push back retirement and be miserable for 5 more years. And, that's the point where you revisit it. You don't have to be done in one outing. Like it's not just one interaction with a client and that has to be perfect and solve all of their problems forever.
Yeah, no. That makes sense. And this goes to another aspect of being a professional where, like, as a consistent advisor over months, years, often you can see, okay, I need to convince them of this thing. And it might take a year, 2 or 3 to convince them. So you can slowly set the clues and the hints. And, so that sometimes, like, because people, to go to one of your, or build on one of your earlier points, despite the desires of your engineering clients, people are not robots. So therefore, it's very rare for a human to hear, here's a logically correct reason why you need to change everything in your life now. No one's going to. But when you need them to change, you can kind of use some marketing with your clients and throw this hint, tell this story, encourage this, show them worse and worse numbers, slowly dial up the fear dial, whatever the approach is, until the point where they're actually ready to make a change.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things that I do, one of the kind of tricks that I do is, as we're looking at it, you can talk to people. People are very eager. Once you break down barriers, people are very eager to share with you what they're spending their money on. And so I can just say, oh, wow, you went hella skiing last week. Was that worth 5 more years in this job you hate? Is that? Because if it is, great, and we can revise the plan. It doesn't matter.
Totally.
If not, if it's not worth it, then let's go back and maybe think about that before you buy the trip.
I like it. I also, before we wrap up, I want to call out one really subtle thing you did in the conversation with the wife that just occurred to me. That just occurred to me now, but I now realize is very clever. So I think it's a useful lesson for the listeners that have made it this far, that are hopefully drinking beer while they're listening as well, which is this moment of silence where you said, "Oh, the plan is that that you should be saving $6,000, X dollars a month, but it's not happening." And instead of you saying what the problem is, you made him put the two dots together. So he realized that the wife had to be spending it. And what I found is, as a super, super powerful client management technique, especially in difficult situations, is to not tell them the thing that you need to say, but lead the horse to the fountain. And so that they put together, even if you put together the first 99 dots, if they put together that last dot, it becomes clear and powerful in their minds in a way that it doesn't if you just tell them. If you tell them. So I think one of the reasons why this situation turned out well was because you used that technique.
Absolutely. And why I like that technique so much is, at that point, it's his idea. It's not my idea. I'm not the one saying that it's a problem. You figured it out. And when people take ownership of their own ideas, very different outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea can be 99% yours. They just need to maybe do that if you're building a house and the only thing you do is like put the final nail on the wall, then like you feel like you built the entire house.
Yeah, they're cutting the ribbon. They got the golden scissors.
And by the way, people talk about that. Like, I know people say, "Oh yeah, I built a house. I did this. I did that." When really they wrote the check and cut the ribbon, and that's it. But they feel that ownership, and we understand that on the big level of building a house. But I think it's very clever what you did in this like micro situation, in this middle of the husband and wife, in this context of doing that. And I think I'm pretty good at these things, but I think this is also one way I can learn from you and improve, because I think my instinct is more to tell them to the end, the 100 rather than the 99. And I think it's because like maybe it's because I like the satisfaction of, oh yeah, it's my idea, but it's actually so much more effective when you can like let go of that and let.
The other thing, that the silence is excruciating, and you do have to kind of get comfortable with that. And we just want to talk. Our brains are screaming at us when there's silence of, you got to fill this up. This is awkward and weird. And you really have to work to suppress that and just, everybody needs time to think. And maybe if he didn't figure it out, she would have felt that pressure to fess up. Everybody's feeling the same pressure to fill that conversation back up. And if anything, the error is to talk too much.
Yeah, that's a great final point to wrap on. That this other technique that you use of just saying it and then being silent, and like to give them the minute or few in order to put together that final dot. And there's such this, we're taught to like hate silence. And I'm like in New York too. So I'm like doubly taught to hate silence. But it's actually super powerful because people aren't robots, again, to the earlier point. And because we're not robots, we sometimes need a moment in order to wire the different facts together.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think we got a whole bunch of lessons, of lessons from here. And yeah, it was great. And we did achieve my goal of getting at least one new lesson that hasn't come up on an episode before. And and I can now feel a bit closer to my father as well. I used to think it was a very different profession. There's nothing. What do I know about accounting? Nothing. But when one of the meta lessons of our one of the meta lessons of our conversation is that so much of being a professional is dealing with people and dealing with these situations, and you and my father both do that great.
Well, wonderful.
And everyone who's watched it to the end, thank you for making it this far. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we had. And now we're gonna continue drinking our beers.
Thanks.